I'm sure you all know about the British Library. I'm not going to read this, just giving you some idea of our scope and also our funding basis. We're about, roughly speaking, getting £100 million years from our Department of Culture, and we have about 30 million of our own revenue that comes in, 2,000 staff and 3 sites. Obviously our major site, the building at St Pancras, but slightly lesser known is that we have an enormous site and half the staff in Yorkshire, in the north of England. Who do we serve? We again have quite a broad group of users as a national library. At core, research, although research I think is a moving feast in terms of the breadth of the definition, but we include not only academic research but also research done to support business and also science and students. We do play a part in the curriculum, the education curriculum, but we tend to distinctively focus on the higher ends, Key Stage 4, for those of you who are familiar. In other words, those people at school who will benefit much more from, for example, the digitisation of primary resources and at least, and hopefully, the sort of rudimentary application of research skills. I think then, obviously, we're involved in the library community, we're a member of that community, and we serve very much from our website and also from our major public building, the general public, with an increasingly rich array of exhibitions and events. The context, I think, in which we are forming our digital strategy and our digitisation strategy is there on this slide. I think the real challenge is the fourth one, about remaining relevant to scholarship, education and the economy in this digital space. We're spending quite a lot of time trying to understand the needs of the so-called Google generation, and looking around, I don't think I see anybody here from the Google generation. And that, I think, is an issue. Oh, somebody on the margins of it, jolly good. Okay, not in the majority, and indeed not in the majority of those who run our universities, our great libraries, and so on. And I make it as a slightly serious point because I think we are going to be hit by a wave of people who have very different expectations of their libraries and their education than perhaps those of us who certainly had our sort of research and university education in a much more linear mode, so to speak. We're also working and trying to work through what does Web 2 mean in terms of what are the opportunities for us to engage with people, with groups of scholars, with groups of experts. Just very briefly, we have done a report actually on the information behavior of the Google generation. It's on our website and it's certainly worth a quick skim. These are just one or two of the highlights. We were trying to assess, the work was done by researchers at University College London, by the way. We were trying to see, is it myth or is it reality, quite a lot of our assumptions. And there are some there. I'm rather pleased that older users are catching up fast on technology, but I think there is still a case that younger people are more competent. Multitasking, parallel processing, I think we do see that. We do see that as a trend. Visual over text, a qualified yes on that one, but certainly an expectation of quite a rich multimedia environment, not just text, I think. And then they're not special in terms of zero tolerance for delay. We're all totally intolerant of any delay. And so, that applies to the way in which we run our lives now. And certainly, and I suspect many of us feel we've had that experience, they are, by and large, a cut and paste generation. And I think challenges the whole rigor of the research process and the need for a new interpretation of what are information skills that people need, both in schools and in universities, and indeed for life. So for us, digitisation, why digitise? What's behind our plans? Well, it's a range. It's not a simple answer, I suppose, from our point of view. Certainly the kind of high-level reason is we want to open up the British Library content to the world. And, you know, as many of you know, we have a lot of it, about 150 million items. And to many people who now go to the internet and to Google and other search engines as their first port of finding information, most of this information is hidden to them. Obviously, by making much of our material available, we would very much hope that we will both add value to existing ways of doing research, but also, I think, fundamentally, when the scale of the digitized material is made available, will actually change the nature of research and indeed some of the research questions that will be possible. Clearly opening it up, we don't see ourselves doing all of the interpretation. I mean, we can't even cope with the scale of the digitization. And so we would very much hope that for particular purposes, either scholarly, education, or for the public, that other people will be adding value and producing products and services to go with what we digitize. So I think all of those things, preservation, obviously rather important, although, as many of you will know, there's a sort of indirect inverse link, namely that the more people see the digital, the more they want to see the original. And you know, so those arguments are quite difficult ones to balance. And the final point is one that perhaps is special to us. I think we find it quite possible to fundraise and to get grant money, and indeed to use some of our own grant and aid for digitization itself. But the real challenge that I think we are in danger of ignoring is how do you fund that total life cycle? Because once you have digitized huge amounts of content, it's not simply good enough to leave it. You have to ensure that you keep it safe, refresh it, update it, and ensure that you can preserve and access it, in our case, forever. That is one of our missions, and indeed the mission of great libraries. So that, I think, is a big unanswered question. I want to talk a little bit about our digitization activities, and I start with the picture and with some comments on one of our top priorities at the present time, which is digitization of our newspaper collection. Many, many reasons. As you know, newspapers fall apart. As you also know, nobody really likes to use microfilm as a surrogate format. And also, we will be moving out of Colindale, our newspaper library, well, it's the board's strategy that we will be out of that building by the end of 2012. So we are aiming to digitize a fair portion. We have microfilm substitutes, and we will then, to some extent, be doing some digitization of demand, rather like your print-on-demand argumentation. We are working very closely with a long-standing partner we have in digitization, which is Thomson Gale. Cengage Gale, which was Gale, which was before that a name very familiar that I'm just forgotten. We work with them on EBO and ECHO resources that are obviously very well embedded in the academic world. The arrangement is a license-based partnership. And at the present time, we have just put online 2 million pages of 19th century newspapers funded by JISC for digitization, and these are freely available to higher education. That was launched in October 2007, available in the reading rooms, and then will be launched to the public in this summer. We have digitized our 17th century and 18th century papers. That was funded by the National Science Foundation, and so those are available as well. We are currently digitizing in phase 2, a further just over 1 million pages, and that will all be complete by 2009. So it is a very, very rich and searchable research resource. We are, by the way, I'm not talking about in any detail, but we have a similar project funded by JISC to digitize from our sound archive, historic recordings, and they're already available 4,000 hours, and we're just completing another 4,000 hours. So again, it's a very rich resource for scholarship, but also actually of enormous interest to the interested public and also schools. We are working, not in our case with Google, but we are working with Microsoft, digitizing books. This is not anywhere like the scale that Oxford is working, or indeed several American research libraries. But we do have this scanning operation set up, and we're aiming to scan about 25 million pages of 19th century books. We've started with literature, 19th century literature, and in fact just put up freely available via the Microsoft Live Search portal 40,000 books. So that's enough, I think, to begin to say, are these things useful? What does it mean? What are the issues? And to get that research and academic debate going about, what are the interfaces, what are the facilities, and that you need to wrap around the scanned books. We're delighted, actually. So we're roughly doing about 100,000 pages a day. That sounds quite a lot. Am I right, Richard? That's right. So in our deep basements, that is what is going on. We're utterly delighted with the quality of the digitization. They are doing it to high scanning resolutions, and also doing not just pages but all the foldouts, maps, and up to A2 foldouts, which is making it a probably slightly slower operation than some of the other services. It's in colour, and I've got a whole list of standards here. If anybody is interested in knowing about them, please ask Richard, who's a technical expert. But there is embedded metadata that will link to long-term preservation of these items. So this is a big project for us and a very important one, and we're delighted to be doing it. I know that you have papers on the European Library. I think Jill Cousins is coming, and colleagues from the Commission, I know, talked a bit about the I-2010. This slide, I think, is sufficient to say that the British Library is a key partner in the European Library, and quite a lot of our treasures are accessible through the European Library portal that's currently there. This will offer and does offer access to the 47 national libraries of Europe in 20 languages, so it is not dominated by the Anglo-Saxons. The resources are both digital and also bibliographical. They're largely bibliographical and point on then to digital content. But the challenge for the European Library and indeed the Europeana, the European Digital Library, is getting up the volumes of digitized content. And I think every country and the Commission even find it hard to conceive of sufficient funding to get the critical mass in those areas. But we regard this as an excellent collaboration across the national libraries of Europe. Again, I think you've heard about 2010, so I won't say very much except to just point to a report that I've been involved in and chairing a group which will come to the high-level I-2010 steering group in June, which is looking at the issues and the dilemmas and the criteria of if you involve the private sector in digitization. And it is a very interesting cultural issue in Europe, actually. Quite a few countries find it a difficult, a very negative concept. Inevitably, in Britain, with the kind of culture that Britain has, we perhaps find it slightly easier to work with the private sector. But we've got case studies in this report, and we've bared our souls in terms of good and bad about the case studies, so they will repay some attention, and also some of the kind of criteria and the guidelines that we have suggested there, that if you are thinking of doing something like this, we produce some checklists of what you must think through, things like the intellectual property ownership, termination clauses, exclusivity, etc., etc. So I hope that that will be a useful guidance for libraries and others and scholars as you are thinking about how to get material digitized. Web 2, I'd like to just speak a little bit about it. Some people might feel this is anathema to scholarship. I believe actually properly used, it's a very, very productive new tool that we should all be engaging with. It isn't just for the youngsters to waste their time with. Our curators are doing blogging around areas of our collection, and certainly blogging associated with the exhibitions they curate. And that encourages dialogue and debate. We are podcasting quite a lot of material around our exhibitions. We're enabling tagging around our Sound Archives website. And we do have various presences in these kind of Facebook, YouTube, Second Life and MySpace. And I think that's quite important. We have some serious, quite short clips in YouTube. One of my favourite ones is actually a performance that was done in the British Library of a whirling dervish. If you've never seen one, I recommend it. It's only 4 minutes. But you know, there are opportunities to just plant sort of small seeds of scholarship or some of the research we're doing or some pieces in our exhibitions in these new range of tools. One of our sites, one of our projects, we have, I think, the best collection of dialects, which underpins a lot of dialect research. We've opened it up, you can go into this bit of our website, and we've opened it up to enable anybody in schools to contribute to that. Now we do a little bit of light touch mediation, so we haven't quite gone Wikipedia. We are more in, for those of you in the know, we are more a sort of citizendian model, which is a light touch intervention before we allow the material to go online. This is the halfway house for curators who are scared of letting go of anything to, you know, opening us up to the whole world to contribute. So the dialects are being populated by contributions from schools and through this map, which shows which areas are well populated and which are not. So I think that's quite an innovative way of enriching what is an extraordinary research tool. On our exhibitions, one of our facets of our digitization strategy is digitizing our treasures. We have a particular, I think, obligation to do that, to make them richly available to the world. I'm rather scared as to whether I could. Oh yes, let me try to go live to the website and just show you how some of this works. So this is a map, interactive map of where some of the texts that are sacred exhibition, which was Islamic, Christian and Judaic texts came from. If I just click on that one, you come to the Diamond Sutra, for example, one of our treasures. And you click on that and you can go more deeply into and zoom in on the treasures, find out more, click on and go to our, turning the pages of all our other treasures, Lindisfarne Gospels, whatever, Lisbon Bible, and so on and so forth. So I suppose my message from that is, I have to get back, I'm not sure how to do that. Let me try that.
Click on PowerPoint.
Sorry? I just need to get. Just close it. Okay.
Top left.
That one. Yeah. Sorry about that. I knew I was trying to be too smart. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, the reason I did show that is that despite my technological incompetence, I'm not a Google generation person, what I want to show is that this digitization is not flat. You know, this is multi-layered and also interactive. So around some of our treasures, we have set up opportunities for comment, for expert discussion groups, and so on. And that becomes more important to us as a British Library, because not being embedded in one university, the notion of virtual scholarly groups is much more important to us. I don't want to talk about our Business and Intellectual Property Centre. It's not what I'm here for, although it's a very successful initiative. But what I really just wanted to say was, for this particular group of entrepreneurs, we set up a Facebook group. And it's quite a serious application. There are about 1,200 members, and they interact around our events and around what we're doing. And we brought them together into the library. So I think this notion that you can be out there in the virtual space and also bring people together in a physical space is very, very important. And they all had name badges with their Facebook identity and pictures, which they were prepared to admit to, but they made the real life connections. So I think we do see quite a long period of this. You know, it's not virtual or physical, it's both. Another point I want to make, and I make it strongly in this gathering of academic people with academic interest, we are taking quite a lot of leadership in the future of intellectual property and copyright, particularly developments in this country. And I do think it's an absolutely critical area in terms of the future nature of research and what is going to be enabled and what is going to be made more difficult. And I've been concerned, I think, that it's been thought to be a library issue. Actually, it is a library issue, but it is also a research issue around the dangers of a consultation, for example, that is out now around exceptions for the exceptions to copyright in the digital space, which you should not assume that people think will be as generous and as good as the kind of library exceptions that you enjoy now for private copying and research activity. So I'm putting up a sort of warning there. The British Library is there very, very strongly, and do look at our manifestos and some of the political influencing we've done there. But nothing should be taken for granted, not least because this is a European, it is a business of Europe, of course. It's EC matter, and there are quite significant lobbies going on for extending term, which might be good for the creator, might be, but not that many people make that much money from it, but will not be good for innovation and research. So you know, I'm not coming down on one side or another. I would just like you to be very aware of some of that. Am I nearly done on time? Fine, okay. Just to say, digitization is absolutely no use at all unless you are in parallel building a very scalable and robust digital infrastructure. This is merely a schematic to show that we have to have and pay as much attention to the digital architecture as well as the physical architecture. And my colleague Richard Boulderstone is here, is in charge of the digital architecture, so you can collar him as to what we're doing. But our priorities there, you can see our prioritized digital content streams is material that has come in through voluntary legal deposit, digital material, digitized books, electronic journals, and obviously our preparations for the scaling up of legal deposit in the digital arena. We got primary legislation in 2003, and we look rather painfully slowly to be moving towards some regulation now for new formats in the web space and in electronic journals. So that is an enormous investment, both in terms of skills and finances. A project that you should be aware of, a major project, digital preservation project, which we're delighted was funded by the European Commission. It's called Planets. It has 15 partners, and it hopes very much to deliver, and is already delivering. It started in 2006. and it's a 4-year project, and it will help deliver both frameworks and usable tools for digital preservation, whether it's by individuals, research groups, or indeed by research libraries. So I urge you to take a look at that. So in conclusion, I think we are seeking very much to do everything we can to accelerate our digitisation programme. You've seen some of the pieces we're working on at the present time, and we are looking and discussing now moving much more strongly into major digitisation of some of our primary resources. Our medieval material, our Anglo-Saxon manuscripts, and some of our India office material, and some of our maps. Web 2 is important. We're working with partners, a range of public-private partners, digital preservation important, don't forget copyright, and by the way, skills, which is a huge agenda in its own right. And then just to finish, it's all in service of what we regard as our enduring purpose, which is to provide the widest possible access to the world's knowledge for all studious and curious persons. I don't think we can put it any better in the 21st century. Thank you very much.